All right, we're live.
Which camera?
The secondary one. So just stand behind your bench.
Hi, folks. Welcome to our Saturday night YouTube Live in support of our Purple Heart project, which we just finished 6 classes for 2022. So we had a total of 42 combat wounded vets from 4 countries. Came from Iceland. No, sorry. Denmark, Ireland, United States, and Canada. We also had the pleasure of having a World War II vet in our last class, joined the Navy in 1945. Wow. Amazing. Had the best dovetail in the class, factoring in his age. It was incredible. Have we got a question? Our topic tonight, by the way, is mortise and tenon, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'll show you some examples. Got a couple other things I want to show you. Got some really good stories to tell you, some fabulous stories of what's going on in our vet world. Frick, do you have a question? We get started right away.
Yeah.
Ken's here tonight. Chris is here. Not sure where Moose is. Jake's behind the camera, or will be. Frick's behind the green globe that he doesn't have set up.
Nope. All right, first question is from Tyler in Stockton, California.
Hey, Tyler.
How do you go about laying out the mortise and tenon joint on an actual furniture piece to ensure all the joints will be square with the rest of the carcass?
How do you go about laying out the mortise and tenon so that everything will be square to the carcass? I'm trying to formulate exactly what he's asking. Say that again, please, Frick.
Okay, so how do you go about laying out the mortise and tenon joint on an actual furniture piece to ensure all the joints will be square with the rest of the carcass?
Well, you didn't quite give me enough information to answer that specifically, so in general terms, it's all in the stock preparation. Whatever you're building is a sum of the parts. So your level of precision on each individual part is going to dictate how well things turn out in the end, how square your joints are. And that comes down to knowing how to use a square and being fussy enough to work until it's right. And it's right when you can no longer see any light. So laying out a mortise and tenon wouldn't be any different. Sometimes, however, if your mortise and tenon, if you've got, you threw me when you said furniture, but I'll show you this as an example. So this is a prototype of a bunch of chairs that I did for a private school in New Brunswick. So the back crest has a double mortise and tenon in this leg, but it's radiused, as you'll see.
You can't see.
Can't see?
There you go.
Can you see the radius on the back so it fits your back? Well, it'd be very difficult to lay out the tenon after you've already cut this. So this is cut from a solid piece of wood. But I start with that block of wood and I cut the tenons when it's a block of wood. Once the tenons are cut and fit, so it's not rolling on your bench, it's sitting nice and flat, then you go in and you cut out the shape. So the mortise and tenon, the shoulders, so make sure you know what you're talking about. So you've got your shoulder that goes all the way around to ensure that it's nice and tight against the inside of the leg. All of that is done while this is still in its square. Once that's done, then you go in and we bandsaw this out, bandsaw that, shape all this with a spoke shave, shape that with a plane. So there are times when you need to keep the part in its big blocky square form to do all the joints and then come in and do the shaping after. Next, Frick.
Next one comes from Joseph Court in the chat.
Hey, Joseph.
He says, what is the benefit of a haunched tenon?
Well, you see it typically on a door. Do I have an example, Jake, that I'm... is on this one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you can imagine what this looks like, This is the style. This is the rail. So there's a oh, by the way, if you're new, if you're on here for the first time tonight, we'd love to know. If you, in the chat, how do you do that?
At symbol.
Ken.
Yep.
At Ken, and just say your name and where you're from. We'd love to know.
And it's Ken Anthony.
And it's Ken Anthony? Well,
Well, if they put at Ken, it's going to bring up all the other Kens that are with us. So,
at Ken Anthony. Is it all run together?
yeah. Well, when they type at Ken, they're going to see Ken's name, and then they can click on it.
Okay. And if you're a combat wounded vet that has been to one of our programs, we love to recognize and give you a shout out. So that too, at Ken Anthony, and tell us your name and what class you were in. All right, back to this. So when it comes to cutting out the mortise, or the rectangular or square shaped hole in this piece, you don't want it right down here. So I move it up. I probably start somewhere up here. The reason is, if you're that close to chopping, it's a good chance you're going to blow out those fibers. So you move it in here. Now that means my mortise is a little bit shorter, but it's much more solid. When I cut a groove to hold this panel, it's a lot easier to cut it all the way through. So I run this on the table saw and I cut a groove all the way through that the panel will sit into. Well, I leave a little section when I cut the tenon. That's the rectangular shaped piece of this section. When I cut the tenon, I cut it the full width, but I make it so that when I put this together, it'll fill that groove. So the tenon's going to be longer here. I don't want to mark on this, but if you can imagine the tenon, if you were to look at it, would come up and then go over and then up, all the way up here and then over. It has to be low enough here to allow for this panel to sit down in there, because this panel has to reach over into here and then reach down into here. The rest of the space is filled up. So it does two things. It fills that gap, and it also gives you more registration this way, which is going to further counteract any twisting that this piece would have up against this piece. And it gives you more glue surface. So it's a way of making the joint a little bit stronger without sacrificing the strength of the piece that has the mortise in it. Here's a few samples. We teach, when we do our class, by the way, oh yeah, I can announce that. So if you're thinking about it, I'll explain this. Training the Hand is the name of the class. It's a 6-day course. It runs from when you arrive Sunday night at 7 o'clock. We have a meet and greet and a nice barbecue and meal. And then the class actually starts 7 o'clock Monday morning. We go from 7 till about 8:30 when we break for lunch, breakfast, pardon me. Breakfast is held right here. We do all our food preparation here. We have staff that do a wonderful job. Breakfast goes from about 8:30 to 9, then we're back to the bench. We work from 9 until 1, and then we break and have lunch. Lunch is usually half hour, 45 minutes. And then we're back at the bench somewhere before 2. We work until 6. We have an hour for supper, always fantastic food. And then we're back at the bench at 7, and we usually work until 9:30, 10, 10:30. On Monday, we cover basically sharpening of chisels, sharpening of planes, sharpening of saws, anything that needs to be sharpened in a hand tool workshop. On Tuesday, we do dovetails, through dovetails, and we do a lot of them. On Wednesday, we do dimensioning of lumber. So we learn to take a rough piece of wood and make it flat, smooth, and square on all 6 surfaces. On Thursday, we do mortise and tenon. We do a regular mortise and tenon, which would be this, where you have it, you don't see it after it's together. This happens to be a double, but same idea. Rectangular hole, rectangular protrusion. The two of them go together, and when they're all glued up, you don't see anything, but it's a nice strong joint, lasts a long time. On on Thursday, we also do a half-blind dovetail. We build a little project. It's called a bench hook. And the bench hook is right, I know I've got one here somewhere. It wouldn't be there. It's right, not there. Any idea where it is, Jake? There it is. I just found it. So, bench hook is 3 pieces of wood that you've dimensioned all the parts yourself from rough. Has has a cleat on the front and a fence on the back, so it goes like this, so that when you're sawing pieces to size, you don't want to sacrifice your bench. So the cleat on the front holds it in place. You squeeze the piece against the fence in the back, use your finger to get it started, and it allows you to go in and make that cut. As you go through the wood, you drop down into your bench hook, not into your bench. So all the parts have to be milled for that. In addition to that, we learn how to do half blinds, as I mentioned, which is the dovetail that you see on the front of the drawer, typically. We learn how to do this, which is called a through wedge tenon. So this is where your mortise and tenon, your tenon comes all the way through, but your mortise is shaped like a dovetail. So when you drive these wedges in after the fact, it makes for an extremely strong joint. Now I've cut this open, obviously, so you could see it, but it makes for an incredibly strong joint and also very decorative. We also do, what am I forgetting? Is that it? Do we do anything else? We work our butt off. And Luthers. So, why did I tell them that?
The class.
Oh, yes. So we just released the class schedule for 2023. Wow, the numbers are peeling away. Our first class is in April. I don't have the dates in my head, but I know it's the last week of April. There's a class in May. There's a class in June. There's one in July. There's one in September, and there's one in October. So there's 42 spots available. How many are sold?
Probably 26, 27.
Somewhere just shy of 30 have already been sold. So there's at least a dozen left. They won't last long because they've only went up on, what day of the week did they post?
Tuesday.
They post on Tuesday this week, so they're selling out quickly. If you're a combat wounded vet, are we taking applications?
Yeah.
If you're a combat wounded vet, that means that you have been injured either mentally or physically in a combat zone. If you're either active duty or honorably discharged and able to prove that, apply. Go to RobCosman.com. Top left-hand corner says PHP. You go down in there and you'll see the application process. Fill it out in detail, please. And write it like you would if you were talking to your therapist. Because we don't know who you are, and we have to base our decision based on what you provide us to read. Jake and I and Super Dave and Luther are the ones that make the decision. Yes, so please apply. We cover all of your expenses, your airfare, your hotel, your meals, all of your meals. I think we do 19 meals. And of course your tuition. Plus we send you home with approximately $4,000 worth of the very best hand tools. So what you're looking at behind me, I'll tell you about that too. Your planes, your chisels, your saws, your sharpening gear, your marking tools, your mortising tools. If I forgot anything, I'll think of it later. That goes home with you. And thanks to Jack Lane and Jim Rossetti and Chris Chahusky and some of the other guys and all the Bench Brigade members, we build you a bench, a premium workbench that we have delivered to your home to be yours so you can continue to do this. So apply, let us help. And there's some really good stories to tell you tonight about what's going on with that. However, I did want to make sure that you knew because it's going real fast. And I don't expect that there'll be any availability left in a month's time. Then you got to get on a list and wait for a cancellation.
Frick, you done chomping?
We good? Okay, Frick, next question. Did I answer the question that was asked?
I can't remember.
I drift.
I can't remember the question that was asked.
Neither do I.
Oh, what's the advantage of a haunched tenon?
Oh, yeah, I did. Okay, give me the next one.
Next one comes from Benji.
Benji.
He says, what hollow chisel mortiser do you recommend?
Oh, that's a good question. So there's a small benchtop one. Delta used to make one. I think General International makes one. I know Powermatic made one, and then there's several that are made by the same company under several different brand names. And believe it or not, do I not have it around here anymore, Jake? Do we sell it?
What?
The little hollow chisel mortiser.
The Delta?
Yeah.
That's what we use for the
Oh, that's what you guys use, right? It's just a little tiny thing. But
half
when,
or
when I
is it
was
a half?
huh?
Is it a half?
It goes up to half.
No, half inch, half horsepower.
Oh yeah, that's the downside. So let me tell you the story. I had one of the first really big jobs that I had as a furniture maker was to provide seating, dining hall seating for 200 chairs and tables. And I started off cutting the mortises by hand. I said, okay, this is going to take a while. So then I switched to a router with a template. That was a nightmare. These are maple chairs. Then I got a hollow chisel mortiser, and I did all of those chairs, majority of them, with the hollow chisel mortiser. It worked wonderfully. However, the problem was that little motor ran at 3,450 RPM, and it was only half a horsepower. So it had zero torque. And if you weren't really careful, it would jam, and it was just a bit of a pain that way. Now, what I have, if you look over here, this is a big brute. This is a Poitra. Poitra, I pronounced that wrong. Anyway,
Quattro?
made in Quebec. It was absorbed by General back in 30 years ago. Neither company's in business anymore. So this is foot operated. So you step on that pedal.
Well, it
Not if you're holding
doesn't
on.
have to be foot operated.
No, you can do it with this as well. So it's got lots of torque. I don't know what horsepower the motor is, but
Looks like a single.
this is a big floor model that would do just about anything, and you could probably, I think we've got mortises up 3/4 of an inch. So what do I recommend? You'd be surprised how much you can do with the small ones, but if you're going to get serious about it and you're going to be doing a lot, you might want to get a floor model one. You really have to just take into consideration what you're going to do. Okay, something else I want to show. Oh yeah, so I just want to tell you what we've been doing because I enjoyed this part. In our online workshop, which we broadcast 3 45-minute episodes each week. So for a yearly fee of, I think, $250, you get, we train you how to build furniture. We start with an idea that we turn into a scale model that we make. All of this is filmed. And then we turn that scale model into a full-size mock-up so everything looks just right. And then we decide what we're going to make it out of, and we go looking for wood and what to look for. We process all of our lumber, and we build the piece. Lately, we've been doing a lot of shop furniture. The very first project in our power tool workshop, which was a combination of both hand tools and power tools, was this bench. Built this in 2012. And then the guys wanted a tool cabinet to go along with it. Well, this needs to be refinished. It's 10 years old. It's bird's eye and mahogany. So I built a tool cabinet to go along with it. And the thing about a tool cabinet is you want it to fit. You want it to fit you, meaning you just want certain tools in certain places so that it's very comfortable and very, what's the word that they use today when things fit? Intuitive. Thank you. So what we did, after we did the model, we built a mock-up. This top section is the mock-up, the bottom section is the finished. And in the mock-up, it was made out of inexpensive material. And over the course of 7 or 8 years, I didn't think it was going to take this long, we would make changes. And then once we had settled on, okay, this is the way we want it, then we would make the real McCoy. So the bottom section is the finished one. The last piece that we actually did was this one, which has all of our tools that are now missing.
No, the last one we did was the pull-out.
So now I know where all my tools are. Huge time saver. I'm just working on the last couple of drawers. In fact, we shot a YouTube video. We finished it today on building drawer slips. These are drawer slips. So instead of having, just tell you real quick, you want your drawer to be as light as possible so that you're not having to you're not having to deal with this huge heavy instrument. You want a nice light box that carries lots of contents. You can get away with narrow drawer sides if you have a dovetail front and back because it really strengthens that piece. The problem is a very narrow drawer gives you a very small running surface. Imagine if this was upside down and that's what the drawer is running on. And not only is this narrow, but the spot where it's running is narrow. And on antique furniture, you would often see it actually would wear grooves right in the wood. Well, by adding a drawer slip, what you do is you double your wear surface without doubling the weight, because you still have thin sides. You just have a little piece added in there that now that's what houses the groove that holds the drawer bottom. So we did a video on that today. And you see it on the inside, and there's different ways that you can treat that, depending on what you want to see or don't want to see. So this section is done. These pull-outs, this is where all of my tools are. And everything has its spots, so it's just fantastic. So now we just started on this section. So if you look over here, we've been working on this one for the last couple of months. The bottom area is going to be all drawers. Now these are drawers that aren't going to be quite as traditional. The drawer bottom is going to be plywood, and it's going to actually fasten to the bottom of the drawer sides instead of sitting in a groove. So you'll be able to take that drawer out and set it down without fear of breaking something. Here's what I mean. I got two examples here, I think. So there's a typical drawer where the bottom sits into the side, but because you have to cut a groove in here, that's weak. In fact, I think it may actually have already been broken. So if you're tossing that around, it's not going to last too long. I thought I did one. Yeah. So here's what I'm going to do. So the drawer sides will be made, and then the plywood will be fastened right to the bottom. So when you set it down, you don't have to worry about breaking that little thin side.
It also maximizes your depth.
Yes, it does. So the drawer fronts of these 12 drawers will all be out of one piece of wood, and we'll take that one piece of wood and we'll cut it so that it maintains that continuity. The drawer fronts are going to be mahogany. The trim is all bird's eye. So up in here, this is where all the planes sit, and there's one piece left to go in here. We're putting leather on it so that it'll cushion it when you set them in there. But there's a lot of wasted space, so rather than waste that space, see what we did? Isn't that neat? So behind all of these planes, there are little spaces to store, mostly blades, anything plane related. And we did it on all of the big ones where it would actually make sense to do it. We haven't put the back in yet, but that'll go in next. I didn't bother doing it up there because the surface area was so shallow, it wasn't going to be worth the effort. Okay, Frick, next question, please.
Anthony Brow he's in the chat. He says,
Anthony.
Does a mortise chisel with tapered sides make it harder to work with?
Yeah, I think it does. So we worked with IBC and designed these mortise chisels. And the idea on these mortise chisels is the sides are square. The chisel, the sides are parallel to each other, and the sides have to be square to the bottom. So that when you set that down, if you're trying to chop a mortise, you want your mortise to be as neat as possible. So if I've laid out my mortise, and I'm going to chop this. The nice thing about a mortise chisel is as you're chopping, the sides keep the chisel from twisting like this. So you get as nice clean wall on both sides as possible, this one and that one. The cleaner that wall, the smoother is going to be the fit, and the nicer and neater it's going to be. It's as simple as that. I don't know why they sometimes would taper the sides. It makes no sense to me. It doesn't get jammed. That's an old wives' tale if somebody tells you that. These perform beautifully well. Now, Jake's gone in and polished up these to a point of, you can see your teeth, and works extremely well. So no, I don't want the sides tapered, and you definitely want them to be square to the side, because when you're setting it down, this is what I meant to tell you. When you're setting it down like this, what I do, or what I offer to folks that are new when they're first learning to do this, if you draw some perpendicular lines like this. There's no way that I'm going to be able to eyeball this side to keep it parallel to that. But I can easily set this chisel down so that it's right on that line. And if that is, this and the side are square, then I know if I'm sitting on the line with the edge of the chisel, then the side of the chisel is going to be parallel to that axis. And that's what you want. So there's our mortise chisels. They come in, what do we got in stock, Ken?
3/8, 3/8 and 3/16.
That's it. We're out of half.
Oh, we might have a couple 7/16.
Have we got more coming?
Oh, always coming. Never coming.
How come
fast.
I'm missing one?
It must be out there.
So they come 3/16, quarter, 5/16, 3/8, sorry, 3/8, 7/16, ½ inch. I'm missing my 3/16. It's out there. I always like to have the size I want and one down, because when you're chopping and you've got some material that's jammed in there, if you're chopping a 3/8 mortise and you're trying to get back in there and get out this material with a 3/8 chisel, number one, you risk wrecking the sides of your mortise, and number two, it's a tight fit. It's so much easier to take one size down, and then you can get in there and pry that stuff out. And yes, you can use a beveled edge chisel, but they're not nearly as stiff, and they have a tendency to flex, which I don't like. So that's why I carry all those sizes of the mortise chisels. Okay, next question.
Next question comes from Mark Hines in Durban, South Africa. Can I use a shim to correct the problem of too much removable waste when cutting the tenon, especially on the long sides?
Okay, say that to me again, please.
Can I use a shim to correct the problem of too much removable waste when cutting the tenon, especially on the long sides?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, what's his name? Tim?
Mark.
Mark. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Mark. So what Mark is saying, you always cut your mortise first. You fit your tenon to the mortise. You don't fit the mortise to your tenon. And when you cut a mortise and tenon, everything is referenced off of the chisel. So that dictates the size of the mortise, and then you use your marking. Ken, can you grab? Is it out there sitting in my tool cabinet? My mortising gauge. Oh, there's one right here. I can take one out. Yeah. You take your mortise gauge, which is a marking gauge, but has a special attachment that my genius friend Paul Hayton up in Ontario helped me develop. And you take your mortise chisel that you're working with, you put it in there, and you squeeze it between those two cutters, snug this up, and now that represents this exactly. And that's how you end up getting an accurate reproduction, or an accurate mortise and tenon. So the question is, what happens if you sawn off too much of the cheek, too much of the side of the tenon or the cheek? So what you can do, providing you haven't taken off too much, is you can take a piece of wood, and you could glue that. I wouldn't do it this way. I would do it in this grain direction. You can glue that piece back on, and then recut it so that you build back up what you took too much off. And yes, you can do that and get away with it. Not a game changer. Okay, next.
Next one comes from Jerry
I
Weeks.
shut that dinging off, but I don't know where my phone is. I hear it. Oh, it's in my pocket. Say what? Jerry?
Jerry Weeks in Comfort, Texas.
Hi, Jerry.
When doing through wedge tenons, how do you determine the size of the wedges in proportion to the tenon?
When doing through wedge tenons.
How do you determine the size of the wedges in proportion to the tenon?
Oh, I do it strictly on appearance. So, where do I have an example of that, Jake? In here. Have we got something? Oh, over there. Actually, Chris, would you do me a favor?
The drawer cabinet,
Yeah.
little drawer,
Where is it?
the little drawer sample.
Yeah.
That's back where it always is. On the
There's a little mahogany one drawer sample back there on the rack. Would you grab that for me, please?
by the entrance to the dining hall. Super Dave pointed out that it must be every tool has its place. That's the reason why everything's so organized and clean in your shop.
It is. Well, we're waiting for him too. Super Dave is coming here Thursday. Big party. We're going fishing. Right after we get all the shop work done. Hopefully that'll happen before his flight home. I'm gonna address that when he comes back with that. Do you want to go to the next one, Frick? And please don't let me forget.
Ken, let's round off.
Oh,
with
yes.
here.
So you got some people to start out to?
Frick,
What?
can you
Ken's
turn
on, mic
poor
on.
Ken's mic.
I have it unmuted.
So these are combat
wait.
wounded vets that have been in our class.
We got John back,
John,
June 22.
yeah, got a great story about John. I'm going to ask his permission before I rehearse it. But John is a Vietnam vet, also known as Santa Claus. Thank you, Chris.
Jeremy Thompson from the August 22 class.
Jeremy, howdy.
John Borden, Sid from the
Sid,
October class.
Never,
Sid was-
never heard of him.
don't know him. So Sid actually works here 1 day a week, except this week. I don't know where he was, but I guess where'd he go?
Hey, Brett,
Oh,
home to
yeah,
Cape
that's right
Breton.
too. Yes, going over to see his brother, I think. Howdy, Sid.
There's a couple other guys, I don't know if they were vets, they just gave me their name and the class they were in. Ray Dorr, October 19.
Oh, yes. Ray Dorr. Cool Ray. Ray is also a Vietnam vet, drove a mule. Right?
Michael Dvorak Vorak,
Yep. Mike.
August 22.
Mike was
And we
here.
got 4 first-time guys. Kenneth Caputo, didn't say where he's from. We got
Hey, Ken.
Steve from Herne Bay, Kent, UK.
Hey, Steve.
Greg Stoner from Laurel, Maryland.
Greg.
Johnny from South Africa.
Johnny.
And
You're up late.
Brett Becker from the French Brigade is on. He had a question too. I don't know.
What? Brett
Becker.
Becker. Do you see a question, Frick, from Brett Becker?
He just wanted you to go through the setup of the hollow chisel mortiser.
That's what his question was?
Yeah.
All right, well, we
All
can do
right,
that.
I just recognized some other names that they didn't speak up.
Oh.
But Danny's on.
Danny who?
Danny Bell's on. Kim's on for
Do we? Kim's on for Jeff? Oh, Jeff's out getting his lathe. So Jeff O'Connor, Jeff makes the shave brush and the Irish kish stick and the knives. The, what do we call them?
Oyster knives?
No, what's the name of the
scale?
Damascus steel knives? And his Kim, his wife, Ken, sorry. Would you go up and get the handbag? It's in my office. It's in a plastic bag right beside of my desk. Please, thanks. Glad you're here, Chris. So Jeff is away picking up. He got a General 260 with the extended bid. So I'm going to show you over down here in the corner. I got to come back to my mortise. Come back over here and look at this. This was made by General in Drummondville, Quebec. That's somebody's frying pan that asked me to put a handle on it for them. So this was the Brute, just a great machine, lasts forever. They made them to go in all the school woodshop programs throughout the years. The company started in 1946 and lasted till about 2016. So this is a really good solid lathe, weighs a ton. And Jeff just bought one, he went to pick it up today, that has an extension. So you can turn telephone poles on it. It goes out another 5 feet out in that direction. So I can't wait to see it in the shop. I can't wait to see what he uses a full extension for. What?
She didn't say that's
He's in the ER. He's supposed to be on his way to, huh?
She said, just square in brackets, he said, I'm representing Jeff, he's in ER. So, emergency room, or is there a place that's got that in the shop?
I don't know. Tell me more, Kim. I'll show you the stuff that we're going to give away tonight.
Okay.
So,
wait, I got.
well, just let me answer this. So here's the through wedge tenon down here. Now, unfortunately, this stuff is oxidized, so you don't get the color, or the color starts to fade a little bit. So this is mahogany with bird's eye maple. Actually, it's just maple wedges. So when I do this, I just look at the proportions. I don't want it short and fat. I don't want it too thin. If it's too thin, it doesn't give you enough mechanical advantage. Thank you. If it's too wide, it looks kind of clumsy. So you just kind of have to play around with the proportions in order to get what you think looks right. As far as the way the joint works, as long as you execute it properly, it's going to be sufficiently strong. But you can draw it out. You know, actually draw out the shape that it's going to be, length and width, and then go in and just color in a section. Does that look right? Do I want it to be bigger? And when you get what you want, go with it. But as long as it's got some slope, the joint's going to be good. All right, who you got?
Pete Kern.
Hey, Pete, waiting for you, brother. Pete is just retired EOD, Navy, friend of Jeff's.
Jeff hurt his hand.
Hurt his hand?
Maybe, probably broke it, Kim's.
Oh, no. And I do what happened?
Jerry Pickering.
Wow. Jerry's
medic.
our Vietnam medic that had quite an interesting story. Jerry's in Ontario, right? American, but lives in Ontario?
No.
Who
Jerry
am I
lives
thinking?
in San Diego.
Oh, Jerry's in San Diego.
Yeah.
Did he send us the kit?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Jerry. I did remember that.
Uh,
Who's the medic? Who's the U.S. Vietnam medic that lives in Ontario? He's building a bench
yeah.
for
Dave Hicks.
Dave.
David Hicks.
Yes, right. David.
Mike Lilman from Florida.
Mike.
Ferris,
Yeah.
Ferris Butler.
Ferris, how you doing, brother?
And Wally.
Wally from Ontario.
Yes.
Hey, Wally.
And,
Canadian combat wounded vet.
And our good buddy Sibby.
Sibby?
Sibby.
Yeah, all the way over in Iceland.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Sibby was a pilot. Had excellent dovetails. They were pretty much perfect. And he almost got the award for the best dovetails in the class until I saw Jack's. Jack was a 95-year-old World War II vet. And when I looked at his dovetail and considered how long he's been around, I said, Sibby, sorry, brother, you lost it. Had to give it to Jack. And I don't think he minded giving up that honor.
And Jeff Church is here too.
Hey, Jeff. Jeff is a pilot, or what? Retired now. Was a pilot for UPS, and made the arrangements to his company to take a bench that was built for one of our vets in Hawaii, and the company picked it up and delivered it over in Hawaii, which was awesome.
John Beck says it's okay to tell his story.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you, John. Next question, Frick. I got to intersperse my stories with asking and answering questions. Now I'm wondering what's going on with Jeff.
Don Erickson in Seattle, Washington. What are your thoughts on using floating tenons?
Well, there's a machine, a domino machine made by, I can never remember the name of the company. So what they're talking about is instead of having this a part of this, you make two of these. So you cut the mortises in both pieces, and then you take pieces of wood that are essentially this shape, only a little longer, and you glue one in one side, and then you glue the other one in. So it's instead of it actually being attached. I'm struggling to come up with the reason. I suppose if you're building furniture for a living, then you do it whatever's going to be. You got to balance strength and the time that it takes with the method that you use. If you're doing it the reason I do it, and most of the people in the class do it, which is the pure pleasure and enjoyment of the process, then I don't have any reason to use a floating tenon. I prefer to do it the traditional way. And that's just personal preference. At the end of the day, they're probably going to be equally strong because if you think about it, wood glued to wood properly means the glue joint is stronger than the wood itself. So you're not sacrificing anything in terms of strength by using a floating tenon. I just prefer to do it the old way. Next.
By the way, Kim said that Jeff hurt his hand when he was getting the lathe.
I heard he was training boxing polar bears to take on Super Dave.
Probably. Jeffrey, you know what I was going to say to him yesterday? I said, make sure you don't try to do something up there by yourself and get hurt. We move enough machinery around here now that I just get my boys to do it. I think of the things that I used to do by myself just because I didn't want to wait. I wanted to get it done. Hopefully he's going to be all right. Okay, next question, Frick.
Next question comes from John Root in Greenbrier, Arkansas.
Hey, John.
He says, when should you use a mortise and tenon joint rather than any other joinery methods?
Oh, when?
Yeah.
Well, excuse me just one second. Well, let's use this as an example. Actually, let's use this. This is more typical. So here you have a door frame. And the door has to be strong. You want it to last a long time. You make a door like this because the frame portion is nice and stable. That means it's not going to get wider and it's not going to get longer, so you can get a nice clean fit. You have a groove in there so you can put an unstable panel. I say unstable meaning it's going to expand and contract as the humidity changes in the air. That sits in a groove. That can move all at once. It doesn't affect the frame because there's enough room for it to grow. So under those circumstances, that's the reason why you make the frame. So how are you going to make the frame strong enough? Well, you actually have a couple of options. So this, you wouldn't want to just simply glue this piece onto there. That wouldn't be very strong. You could put a miter in, because I've done that over here. If you look at this one, these are two pieces. These are two pieces that have been mitered, but you'll also notice in order for this to work, this piece and this piece have to be the same width. And then I ran a spline, which means after I glued it up, I went over to the table saw and I ran a groove like that, and I put in a spline, a piece of wood, whose grain is running that way, and when you glue it in, it makes for a pretty strong joint. These pieces, this is not as wide as this, so I couldn't use a miter there, at least it wouldn't look right. So I had to do some other way of reinforcing this piece onto this piece. I could have doweled it. Oh, I have no faith in dowels. I've never seen a dowel. If you've ever seen a chair joint break, it's almost always a dowel joint that comes apart. So I don't use dowels very often at all. Not a lot of confidence in them. So really, the best option here is a mortise in this piece and a tenon in that piece. Can't really think of any other options that I would do for something like that. Where else would be a good example of a mortise and tenon joint? This. When you build a carcass or a case, this piece and this piece can be dovetailed, but the piece down the bottom, this piece has to fasten into here somehow. Well, you sit it into a dado, but that doesn't give you a ton of glue surface. If you make your dado too deep, you really severely weaken this piece. So the dado tends to be rather shallow. So to strengthen it, again, you could dowel it, but then the dowels would be in a very short hole, which wouldn't give you much glue surface. Instead, in this case, what I did is I made mortise and tenon joints. So it came all the way through and it was wedged, makes for an extremely strong joint. So the question was, when do you use a mortise and how do you know when to use a mortise and tenon or something else? I don't know if there's a one sentence answer to that question. The best I can do is what I just did, give you some examples. One more would be a good one, would be right here in a chair. So no matter what, you've got a seat, you've got a back, and you typically have 4 legs. There's a lot of stress on this joint because everybody leans back like this on the chair. So what are your options for here? Obviously you can't just glue it, meaning this piece onto that. That wouldn't be enough. You can dowel it, but there's enough stress on there, guaranteed it's going to come apart. So in this case, I have a deep mortise, meaning the tenon comes really far, comes almost to about, maybe 3/16 of an inch here. So there's lots of glue surface. It's a double tenon. It's a little bit of space in between to help maintain the integrity of this piece. And then this rail right here has 2 half-inch dowels. One goes through here, one goes through there. They pass through the cheek, which is this side of the mortise. It goes through the tenon, and it goes into the cheek, which is this side of the mortise, to lock it. Now, I just got done bad-mouthing dowels, and then I'm telling you I use them here, because most people don't typically lean on their chair like that. Most of the stress is going to be over here. So because that's not a highly stressed joint, a half-inch dowel worked. Same thing up here. There's 2 half-inch dowels. They pass all the way through. And this one hasn't come apart, and it's been kicking around the shop since the early 90s. And a tenon up here. Again, your option would be, you have dowels or mortise and tenon are really the only options. You're not getting into screws. We're talking fine furniture. And again, I just don't trust the dowels. So I'll reference you a good book, The Encyclopedia of Furniture Making by Ernest Joyce. It's an older book, printed in 1971, and it's got all kinds of, just about everything you'd ever want to know about both hand and machine joints, or the same joint can be showing you how to do it either way. And it'll give you lots of background information. You get a feel for it after a while, but you got to get a little bit of base knowledge. And your best place to get the base knowledge is not YouTube, but it's actually from books. And the older they are, the better, because they were written by guys who actually did this for a living. They weren't hobbyists that were just doing it for fun. So reach back. I want to show you, the way we work tonight is we do this as a means of fundraising, so we can put on our Purple Heart project, and so that you can participate. So we bring in 42 combat wounded vets, male or female, whatever, every year, and we figured out it's just shy of $7,000 per was the total bill. So by the time you factor it all in, it's over $300,000 expense, and we appreciate your help. So you're welcome to donate to the cause tonight. You go on our website, do it through the website, because then we don't have a bunch of fees to deal with. And to say thank you, we just do a draw every night. You don't have to donate to enter the draw. Frick puts the link up frequently. And what we do is to support some of the other vets that we work with, we buy their merchandise from them at retail, and we give it away as a prize. And the average prize is $300. So we have Bob Abbott makes the cutting boards. Jeff O'Connor makes the shave bowls and the knives and the kiss stick. Danny Bell makes what do we call them?
Catch-alls.
No, it's kind of a tray. It's got a word. It's got a name. Dang it, I can come up with it. It's fairly new, that's why I'm having a struggle. So that's what Danny makes. Kevin Burris makes these laser engraved, it's engraved in either granite or slate, whichever you choose. I like the slate. And we also invited Kim O'Connor, who represents that often neglected wife of the combat wounded vet. And Kim hand makes these handbags. So I asked her to do one up for me that was very patriotic, if you're in the United States. So this is the handbag that she made.
Table caddy.
Table caddy. Thank you. Danny was on.
Yeah. He also wants you to say hi to his girls and Jenna
Hi, Jenna.
and his
Millie
Ellie.
and Millie and Ellie.
Mila and Ellie.
Mila and Ellie. Girls, you're up late. I guess it's not late. It's only 7 o'clock down there. If you were here, you can model this bag because I don't think Jake wants to. But Kim makes this incredible craftsmanship, craftswomanship.
Chris
What?
could.
Who?
Chris
would?
could do it.
We can wait for Super Dave. So there's Kim's picture and her story. You'll have to pause it after. And there's the bag. I ask people whenever they come in, I said, what do you think of this? And they're always impressed with the craftsmanship. So really nice. And we'll do the draw tonight, depending on, we give away one prize for every $1,000 in donations. So I'll get a few questions, and I'm going to come back and tell you the John Beck story and the mattress Doug story. Questions, Rick?
First one is from Eric. How do I determine the proper size of a mortise and tenon given the wood size I am using? Is there a rule of thumb?
How do I determine the proper
Sizes
of a mortise and tenon?
given the wood size I am using. Is there a rule of thumb?
Well, there is. If you're dealing with a door frame like this that's 3/4 inch stock, then your joint's only going to be as strong as the weakest element. So here's a better example. Obviously, if you look at this piece, you've got a piece of aspen that's 3.5 inches wide by 3/4 of an inch thick. Where is its weakest point between my hands? Well, obviously over here, because these pieces are only 1/4 of an inch thick. So if I wanted to make that stronger, I'd make these bigger. But if I make these bigger, that means the hole on this piece would have to be bigger. So if I had little 1/8 inch sides on either side of these big gaping mortises, well, that would be the weak point. So typically what we do is a third, and a third. So we take this dimension, which is 3/4 of an inch. This is 1/4, this is 1/4, and this is 1/4. And obviously it has to correspond with that piece. Now, if you were making something like this, where you're joining a piece into the face of another piece, where really you don't have to worry about weakening this piece too much, what you can do is have just enough, keep this as wide, keep the tenon as big as you can, with just a small shoulder all the way around. The reason you want the shoulder is so you get a nice clean fitting joint where that piece comes up against the face of this piece. Here's another example. So this is a keyed. So this is designed to be knocked down. So I keep that piece as big as I can. It's just got a little bit of a shoulder on it. That fits in there like that. And then when I drive this wedge in, it makes it rock solid. So I'm not overly weakening any of these pieces. So you always you always have to remember, it's always going to result, the strength of the joint is going to be brought down to this weakest point, or the smallest, the thinnest, what am I trying to say? The weakest member. So you can't sacrifice one in order to make another one bulky. Okay, let me tell you a quick story. So John Beck, who was a Vietnam vet, was here this summer. Big bushy white beard, known as Santa Claus. And John contacted me. Somebody that he had helped out turned around and wanted to pay for a wounded Vietnam vet that John knows. Hopefully I'm getting the story right. This guy suffers severely from PTSD, and most of these guys, particularly when you step back 10, 15, 20, 30 years, these guys don't want to acknowledge what they have, and they certainly don't want to be diagnosed. So they're trying to get him to our program. And this fellow that John had helped, who I think is a Vietnam vet himself, has stepped up to the plate and is paying the total cost to have John's friend come to the class as a civilian student, although we'll put him in with the vets, covering all of his expenses, buying him all the tools, and made a sizable donation to the Purple Heart Project with any money left over. So big shout out. John, thank you for managing that, and we will do our very best to take care of your friend when we get him here. Got another story to tell you. I'll let that sit in between a couple of other questions. Frick, please.
Buddy in the chat says, when do you recommend using a double mortise and tenon?
Whenever the mortise is going to be so big that it really weakens the piece. So I could have made this one mortise, but then you got this great big opening. So, you know, I could probably squeeze these sides and see them move because of that. But by putting this, leaving this piece in here, it strengthens or it increases the integrity of this piece without really taking anything away from this piece. Yeah, does it give you any extra glue surface? A little bit, but really not enough to warrant that alone. I just think it strengthens this piece, particularly over on here. So this mortise, it would have been cut in here, would have gone from within about 1/8 of an inch of the bottom, 1/8 of an inch of the top. So you'd have had a great big, huge cavity cut out of here. And it goes quite deep. So really, it would have taken a lot of meat out of this. Rather than do that, I divided this and made this 2 tenons, and I left about a 3/4 inch section in there. And I just think that gives back a whole lot of strength to this piece in an area where it's going to really need it. Now Jake made a table. He hasn't finished it yet, but there's 4.
Yeah.
He put in 4 tenons instead of one great big huge opening. So that actually would give you a lot more glue surface because you pick up double. Yeah, you would get double. Next question.
Next question comes from Mark. Is there an advantage to using a through mortise and tenon versus the standard blind mortise and tenon?
Is there an advantage? Oh, yeah.
To using a through, yeah.
Well, the first advantage is the cosmetic.
Well,
because it gives
he
something
might
else
mean
to,
this.
No, blind. Blind meaning he's not going to see it.
No, he might mean that when he says through mortise and tenon.
Oh, not wedge? Read it again, Frick, please.
Is there an advantage to using a through mortise and tenon versus the standard blind one?
All right, then we're going to talk just this. No advantage whatsoever. It's just a feature. So when you put a finish on there, that end grain of the piece of walnut stands out, and it's something else to look at.
A little extra glue.
And you got a little extra glue surface, yeah. I mean, if you held that back 1/8 of an inch, but not enough to, I think, to warrant doing it if there was no reason to have it come through. Kind of a craftsman style where you see the joinery and you accentuate it and you make it part. It's the feature. Instead of superfluous carvings, we would actually bring the joinery out. Same reason when I do my dovetails on drawers, I like to have the tail sticking out a little bit longer on the back. No reason, I just think it looks neat. And I use the same setting on the marking gauge front and back.
Next.
Rick?
Next one comes from Brian. Can you demo how to use a router plane or chisel to perfect the tenon fit?
Can you demonstrate how to use?
A router plane or chisel to perfect the tenon fit.
Yeah. Yes, I can. Let's use this piece. No, not that one. What are we going to use?
Well, use
Do
that.
you remember that single one is? Well, I don't have to actually do it. So let's say that this is just a little bit too tight. Now, what's the perfect fit? Well, if you can wobble it back and forth, then it's too loose. The glue does not have any gap filling capabilities. So in order for the glue to work, it literally has to make contact like that. And ideally what you want is these 2 sides sandwiched in there so that they're both making contact like that on either side of the cheek. So if it's too tight, all you're going to do is force all the glue to the bottom, and you essentially have a mechanical fit with a bit of masking tape or Scotch tape holding it together. It won't last very long. So how do you dial in and get that perfect fit? Well, probably the most precise way is to use what's called a router plane. Now, the sides of this board are parallel to each other. So I would use my router plane, and the router plane is going to ride or reference off of this, and I would set my cutter, I would find the lowest point, meaning whatever, I want this to be parallel to that. So if it's not, there's going to be a low point. And I would go in and I would dial this in until I was just making contact with that low point. And then I could come in here, and I don't want to do it because I don't want to ruin this, but I would go and I would go back and forth until that surface was now parallel to that surface. And remember, when you're using this, the cutter's wanting to pull it down like that, so you have to have lots of force on my left side to keep that tight to the to this face. And you would take it out and you would check it, and if it's still a little bit too tight, if this is already cleaned up, I might go over and do the same thing on this side. But you just have to be careful not to take off too much so that you end up getting that perfect fit ultimately. Now, that is the most accurate way of doing it because you don't have, there's no guesswork, with the exception of keeping the router plane from tipping on you. It's pretty much impossible to screw it up. If you want to use a chisel to do the same thing, well, that's going to be a little tougher because you don't have any kind of a guide. So if I was going to come in here and pare across like this to try to make that surface parallel to this one, that's difficult at best. That would not be my chosen way of doing it. You could use, and I used to use it a lot until I decided that the router plane was a better way. You can use. Come on. What?
Real quick, Pete Kern wants to know which router plane you recommend.
Pete, if I was going to buy one of the two, and I say, does he want brand or size?
Go with both.
No, well, I like the Lee Nielsen. So here are the two router planes available. There's this one, which is patterned after the Stanley number 71, and this one was the Stanley number 271. I would probably get this one first. I find I use this more than I use that one. Obviously, there's going to be times when you need this one, but this one can usually do what that one can do. This will just do it faster because it's got a larger cutter and a little more capacity. But I like this one. I use it a lot. It's very simple, relatively inexpensive tool. So I would buy the Lee Nielsen over any other brand. Huh?
Keep going.
Okay,
that was just supposed to be a quick side note.
So the other option on this is I can use a skew block plane. So a skew block plane, this is another Stanley number 140, but the Stanley never had a fence. Lee Nielsen added this, which was quite ingenious. And what you would do, you set it up so that the blade is just projecting beyond the side. You take your side plate off. This fence you want to adjust so that when this is locked in place,
look at that.
Came up tight. Excuse me. Excuse me. All right. So you would set your fence so that it allowed the blade to go right into the corner, and then you would lock it. And then you would come in and you would peel that off. Now, it's up to you to determine if you're tipping, and you don't want to be going down this way or that way. You want these surfaces to remain parallel with that. So this is certainly more accurate than using a chisel, but it still has room for error because you don't have any real reference to keep it or to get it parallel to that. Router plane is the best option. And one last one is you could use your shoulder plane as well. You're going in there because the shoulder plane blade cuts right to the edge. It allows you to go in there and clean that off. But again, you don't have anything other than, I suppose you could put a block in there maybe, but you really don't have anything to control whether or not this is remaining parallel to that, other than your own skill.
Sibby wants to know if you could explain a little the layout for the keyed tenon. What considerations should be made regarding
This
the
one?
opening for the key and which way the key should slope?
Okay, so now the place where I did this, which you might want to look at, is over here on my bench. So I'll tell you the quick story behind it. When we used to travel and do the wood show circuit, it was it was a ton of work. You would go and you'd set up on Thursday. It would take you all day because I hate doing it. And you'd finally get set up. You got your bench and you got your tool cabinet and you got all your merchandise being displayed. And then you work like a dog Friday, Saturday, and Sunday because you only are open 7 or 8 hours a day and you had to sell as much as possible to pay for being there. And then come Sunday night, you had to tear everything apart. My first bench was all put together with bolts. And I'd always lose a wrench. So you run around borrowing wrenches, taking things apart, and it just took a long time. Well, this was just the solution that had to be brought into existence. So taking it apart was as easy as knocking out that wedge. Putting it together was as easy as tapping that wedge in place. And it's rock solid. It's tighter than any set of bolts and nuts are going to do. Now, how much slope? I think I've got a 5-degree slope on there. Let me take that back out. It wouldn't be any more than a 5-degree slope. If it's too steep, then it doesn't have the, help me out there, Chris. What's the term? Yes, if it's too steep, it won't lock as well. It's like a Morse taper. If it is too steep, it won't lock. So you want enough slope, but not too much. And like I said, I think I use 5 degrees on it. And you need to make sure that this mortise perfectly lines up with this. So you can't have this 4 degrees and this 5 degrees. It's got to be such that when you tap that in, it's making contact everywhere. So when you give that the final tap to seat it, I shouldn't have been using that. What marks I made on it. It really works well. Now the layout. You need to have enough material beyond here, so there's got to be enough material in here to keep from blowing this piece out. So if this was too close up here, you would tap that in there and it would blow that section right out. So I probably have double. I do. And you also have it laid out so that if you can see the bottom, it's down low enough so that this is going to come up tight before it bottoms out down in here. I don't know what else I can tell you about that. There's no reason to have it any. Oh yeah, okay. There's. So you also don't want to. You don't want to severely weaken this piece. So if I cut my mortise so it was that wide, then you just got 2 little pieces over here. Well, that's not only is that not beneficial, it severely weakens this piece. So I took about 1/3. So you went 1, 2, and 3. I made it. And I don't think I did that on purpose. I just kind of did it and it made sense. So the mortise is 1/3 of the width of the overall piece. This doesn't need to be terribly thick because this doesn't need to be extremely wide.
No, the other way.
Go the other way like that?
No. The mortise. Flip the mortise around. Look at the oxidation.
Yeah. So, quick recap. Make sure that the slope you use on the wedge is the same, matches perfectly the slope on the underside of this. And I think 5 degrees is probably ideal. Give yourself enough material out here so that it's not going to be too weak.
Make sure your wedge doesn't bottom out.
Yeah,
Yours is
yeah.
close.
You can't have your wedge bottom out. I still have about 3/32 of an inch, so that's a pain. Then you have to start over. That's it. Nice and solid. It's a fun joint to do. I did it somewhere else too. I can't remember where.
On the saw bench.
Oh, yes. Yes, the saw bench. Okay, so here's what?
Super Dave would like to do one more wood show.
He would like to do one more wood show? All right, we'll see if we can't. You never know. There might actually be one more. So I work with several of these vets, and we had one in particular. Well, not in particular. We had one that needed to get some finances together to further his business, and he had 3 pieces of equipment. He had the exact same. This stuff was all bought in 2020, so it's almost brand new. He had that saw stop. Now that saw stop of mine is the industrial. That's the biggest one they make. It's a 3 horsepower, single phase, has a 52-inch capacity to the right of the blade, and just best saw there. We own how many of these?
3.
3 of these. They're fantastic. So we had that for sale. He's got a Grizzly 8-inch jointer that looks like it's brand new out of the box. He's got that for sale, and he has a 20-inch heavy-duty Powermatic thickness planer for sale. This stuff's all brand new. It still has original grease on it. The guy wanted to buy it. The day came, or just a day or so before, and this vet that I'm working with had things all planned out around this. This was going to solve a lot of problems. Well, I can't remember exactly what happened, but the guy that was going to buy it ended up becoming the
Heir.
The heir to some equipment from someone who had passed on, and it made all this stuff redundant, so the deal fell through. And the vet was pretty upset. So I thought, well, let me see. I know some people. So the first guy I call him Mattress Doug. And the story with Mattress Doug is I met him. He became a customer during COVID, and I call every customer, say thank you, and oftentimes it ends up in a conversation. And Doug has a company in what's the name of the city? Dubuque. No, it's Dubuque, Iowa, and it's been in business a long time. But when COVID hit, business dried up overnight. But there was a real shortage of masks, particularly for first responders. So Doug brought his employees back in just to make masks for first responders. No cost, just to help out. And I thought, you know what, that's remarkable. So I got talking with Doug, and anyway, ended up that Doug and a friend of his ended up coming this summer, and they came to the class, and it was great having them. Well, I called him, and I texted him, I guess. And I said, Doug, I told him, I said, I've got a vet that needs to sell these 3 pieces of equipment. Do you know anybody who'd be interested? And he said, well, our club might. He says, give me a day, or give me today to think about it, figure it out, and I'll let you know tonight. So that night, I got a text from him, and he said, I'll buy the equipment from the vet, pay him for it, and then I'm going to donate the equipment back to you, and you can sell it as a fundraiser for the Purple Heart Project. And that just speaks volumes of Doug. Just a great guy. So I want you to check out his website. We're going to buy our mattresses. We are putting in Airbnbs here so that when we have the vets in, they stay right here under our roof. We've had some issues with the hotel that just making it a stressful situation. So we're going to do it all, keep it all under the same roof. So his website is, drum roll, his website is,
Sorry. I'll post it in the thing.
okay, Frick will put it up. It's a long one. But I want you to go there and check it out. If you have need for a mattress, give your business to somebody that's really got their heart in the right spot. I think Doug is fantastic. Just the way he stepped up to the plate. Anyway, so these 3 pieces of equipment, we'll get the information out there and get the pictures up there soon, and we'll plan to sell them on our next live to the highest bidder. So if you have need for one of those pieces of equipment or all 3, they're in the U.S., they're in the East Coast, so it doesn't cost that much to ship them. They're actually in New Hampshire, and the funds from it are going directly to the Purple Heart Project. So there you go. Anybody just shout out any more vets? Did you find any, Jake?
Yeah, Chris Campbell,
Chris from.
the last one.
Hi, Chris. Oh yeah, we had 2 Chris's.
From
Yep.
Tennessee.
Yeah. Hi, Chris.
Ahmed just joined.
Ahmed, haven't seen Ahmed in a long time. So all the prettiest wood I own comes as a result of 2 people, Ahmed and Mel up in Ontario, which we're going to do something with that's going to benefit you guys in the very near future. Big howdy, Ahmed. Good talking to you, brother.
We got 2 more first time. Elizabeth Close from Spencer, West Virginia.
Hi, Elizabeth. Welcome.
Gary Duchatel from Australia.
Hey, Gary. It's tomorrow. Hope it's a nice one.
Jesse Marler's here too.
Hey, Jesse. How you doing, brother? Keep up the good work.
Uh,
Anyone else?
no. But I got a quick question.
Yep. What?
Is there a rule of thumb or formula or a guiding principle for how deep to make your mortise?
Yes, there is. So, let's talk about which one first. I don't have one that
There's
I
only that-
want. So
The aspen one.
Huh?
The aspen one.
Well, we can do this one. So, obviously, if you're going to come, the more of this material that you remove, in other words, the bigger your mortise, the more material you're removing from this, the weaker this piece is going to be. So now the balance is how much is enough, how much is too much. Well, if you're not going all the way through and making a feature of it, then don't go anywhere near the end. If you go almost to the end, it'll telegraph on you. I mean, over time you'll get a sunken in area, so you'd want to stay at least a quarter of an inch away to prevent that from happening. But then the next question is, at what point do you have sufficient glue surface? And I would say I would probably go halfway on this. At that point, you've got enough registration that you're not going to make it twist easily. It's going to be good and rigid, and you've got enough glue surface in there that before that joint will fail, the wood itself will fail. So I don't know if I've ever seen that written, but I would go on something like that. I would go half. My mortise would be half the width of the piece. And what other example do I have that we could talk about? Of course, this one doesn't matter because it's coming all the way through. The only other one I was going to mention was that if a mortise was coming in like this on a headboard, and that was your rail, you don't want to get too close because it'll leave that sunken. So the same thing. You want enough so that you have enough to keep it from flexing this way, or not having enough registration to prevent it from moving this way, and you need enough glue surface. Okay, here's another one. And how far did I go on this? I didn't go halfway on that. That's only about a third, and that would be plenty. I wouldn't think I would need any more than that, so I might even amend what I just told you. So I'll say less than half the width. A lot of it is very specific to the job, and you have to be able to go in and critically look at that and decide, okay, do I have enough or don't I have enough? Next, Frick.
Next one comes from Greg in the chat. He says, how do you fix wonky shoulders on my tenon?
Probably the easiest way to do it. So what he's saying is, in the process of cutting this joint, he got the shoulders out, which happens frequently. You create the shoulders with your marking gauge. So you've set your marking gauge, and you've cut a shoulder all the way around, and now you need to trim to that line. At first, you try to saw it. Ideally, you get it right from the saw. If you don't, then you got to go in and fix it. If it's a very light fix, meaning you left just a little too much material, remember I have yet to talk about taking off too much. You haven't taken off enough. The easy way to do it is to get a chisel appropriately sized, and you're going to come in there, and you're going to sit on that gauge line and then just take a little paring cut toward the tenon. And then you can just move that along and just do that along the entire way, if that's just a small amount. If it's a large amount, you may need to have to come in and use your shoulder plane. And the shoulder plane would reference against the side of the cheek, providing that cheek was parallel to this. So if this is not parallel, you got to fix that first. That you would do with your router plane. Then you would go in and you would make a pass along like that, and you would go down to your line. Make sure you come to this side first and give yourself a little cut right there so that you've essentially created that little chamfer that'll keep from blowing out the back side. If your problem is that you've gone below your line, well, now you got a real issue, because now you've taken too much material off of one side. At that point, I would come over to my shooting board, and I would make sure, if you hadn't already done, if you haven't, as long as you didn't touch this, you're okay. If you did do something to the end of these, I would come in, I would square them up on the shooting board. I'd make this square to this side. Then I would come in, if you can afford it. I say that because maybe you can't make the piece any shorter, but if you can afford it, you can come in with your marking gauge and reestablish your baseline going to the lowest point, and then go in there and carefully rescribe all along. Now, if there's not enough material there, you may have to add a little block of wood. You may have to add a block of wood on there. You can do that as well. Anything that will allow you to reference and use that to go in and reestablish a new shoulder and then essentially start over. Pretty easy way of doing it. Marking gauge is extremely versatile. Make sure you have I have 3 of them, a good marking gauge. And a good marking gauge means this face is nice and flat. This cutter is super sharp. And other than that, the rest of it doesn't matter. But those 2 are critical. Next, Rick.
Next one comes from Danny in Queensland, Australia.
Hey, Danny.
It says, is there a guiding principle to help determine the depth of a mortise should be cut?
You been paying attention to this show, Frick?
No, I haven't.
What are you watching?
I just asked that question 5 minutes ago.
All right. Then the next one comes from Lincoln in Barbados.
Don't wake up, Frick. Lincoln?
Lincoln, and he lives in Barbados.
In Barbados. I'd trade plots with him right now.
Yeah. If you don't have or have access to mortise chisels, any tips or tricks to do the job better or easier with a regular bench chisel?
Oh.
Small bites?
Huh?
Small bites?
Well, the big task or the challenge is in keeping these 2 inside surfaces parallel to one another. So if you're in there, if you're trying to use a beveled edge chisel and you're trying to pare down that side, and then you're trying to pare down that side and keep them parallel, you can only imagine how difficult that's going to be. Now, if you had sufficient space, you could come in and you could clamp a block on there like that, right along the gauge line, and use that as a guide to hold your chisel. So a lot of people will do, and they'll go in and they'll drill out the majority of the waste, and then they go in there and they pare the sides down. But keeping that precise is really difficult. That's the advantage of a mortise chisel. Your mortise ends up being the exact width of the chisel, and if you do it right, it's going to be all the way down. So when you come along and cut that tenon, it makes contact all the way down on both sides. So a guide block on the side is probably your best bet to get it close. But save up and get yourself some mortise chisels, good mortise chisels. And you know what? They're tough to find. And the reason they're tough to find is because how many people do you know actually cut mortises professionally? You're lucky if you know anybody that woodworks professionally. And I know very few people, very few, I can count them on one hand, who cut dovetails in their work that they actually sell by hand. The number of people that cut mortise and tenons would be a fraction of that. So if there's no professional demand, there's not going to be much of a professional supply. It doesn't make sense. We talked IBC into doing these, and it took us forever and a day. How long?
3 years.
3 years. I think it was more than that. And we finally got what we wanted. And we're constantly battling to get enough. So of the 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 chisels, we have, what did you say we have in stock?
3, but one of them's almost out.
3 of the 6. Hopefully, the 1/4 inch has been out forever, but I have rumor there's some coming. So, good problem to have. Good problem to have that we sell so many. Bad problem that we don't have them when people want them.
All right, Frick.
Next, Frick.
Next one's from Alfred Borg in Melbourne, Australia. He says,
Hey, Alfred.
Hi, Rob. I don't have much experience in doing a through wedge mortise and tenon. What do you suggest is an accepted angle for the slope that won't snap off the angle ends of the tenon and mortise while still keeping its strength?
I assume he's talking about a through wedge tenon.
Okay,
He doesn't
say,
want it flared too much.
okay, say that again, please, Frick.
Are you paying attention to me?
Well, I am, but you don't enunciate in the right spots.
Hi, Rob.
Thank you.
I don't
Yeah,
have
that's
much
perfect.
experience in doing a through wedge mortise and tenon. What do you suggest is an accepted angle for the slope that won't?
And accepted, he said a through wedge tenon.
Yes.
What is the accepted angle for the slope?
That won't snap off the angle ends on the tenon in mortise.
Oh, okay.
still keeping it
Okay, now I
straight.
know what it means.
So
Okay.
show them.
So here, probably about a 15-degree slope, 10 to 15-degree slope is all you need. But when I do these, I always saw the when I make the saw cut. So what he's talking about is, imagine the pieces of walnut aren't in there. So before I put it together, I have to make a saw cut that goes from here down to here, so that when I put the walnut wedge in, it pushes this piece over, and the glue makes this piece, this piece, this piece, this piece, and this piece all one. Well, if I made my saw cut too far over here, now when you drive that wedge down, you're pretty much guaranteed you're going to put a split in here. So I keep it so it's just far enough away that it'll keep it together, meaning I don't want to be losing this before I get around to assembling it. So it's got to be strong enough that it doesn't blow off. However, I want it so that when I do put this in, that'll relatively easily bend without causing any problem. So I would suggest, of course, it's going to be different with every species of wood, but if I'd have left on this one 32nd of an inch, that would have been fine. On hardwoods, probably the same. If you'd left the 32nd of an inch, it'd be enough. You just don't want to leave too much so that it creates a split that goes
So what
down
about
in
the
here.
angle? You said 15?
Well, yeah, 50. Well, let's check that one. See what it is.
Ken, is Nick Brown on?
Nick? Local Nick? Howdy, Nick. Haven't seen you in a while.
I
You have
wonder
to-
if he's
you have to come
still
up.
not married.
Well, we could ask Erica.
It's gonna be in Market Square next weekend, I think.
Is he? Why? What's in Market Square?
Not Market Square, down on the port for their big Christmas bazaar.
Oh, really? I'll have to get in and see him. So I said, I never measure these, by the way, when I'm doing them. So this is actually 8 degrees. That's very shallow. That's enough. So I'm going to amend what I said. I would say somewhere around 10 degrees.
Well, a dovetail, right?
Yeah. And my dovetail slope is 10 degrees. So if it's good for a dovetail, it's good for a through wedge tenon. How are we doing on donations?
There's a phrase that goes, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Is there one for these birds?
No, there's no one for these birds. But Super Dave would probably be able to come up with one, being the wizard that he is. Actually, I can't take the title of wizard away from Kev. Kevin Burris is our wizard. Comes up with incredible wisdom frequently. What's next?
We have another new viewer,
Hello, new viewer. What's their name?
Zukon from West Simsbury, Connecticut.
Hey, Jack. Welcome. Hope you enjoy it. How are our donations tonight? How many prizes are we giving away? Anybody know? This is a piece of cocobolo, by the way. And this is a scraper blade. And when you sharpen it properly, you pull off a nice shaving, particularly on figured woods that are otherwise very difficult to work. And you're going to be hearing a lot more about this from us in the next little bit, maybe as early as this week. I was telling Jake the other day, these shavings come off from the scraper so fluffy and soft. That's what you want. Soft, fluffy shavings. Next, Rick.
Next
That
one
was a little commercial, by the way.
Next one comes from Tim in the chat. How do you check the mortise for square and straight walls?
How do you check the mortise for square and straight walls? Well, depending how you cut them, you could you put your chisel in there and eyeball it And you can tell whether or not it's leaning one side or the other. If you didn't do it that way, then you can stick something in there, lay it up against the wall, and same thing, eyeball it. You're just going to extend that wall so that you can see. You may have to push something down in there so it's actually touching. Probably the easiest way to do it. The narrower it is, the harder it's going to be to do.
Square and what?
Straight, but what he means is flat. So this surface has to be flat. That's the word you want on that one. That surface has to be flat in order for it to make contact with this. Because if this is flat, that has to be flat. So the two together will actually touch. Next, Frick.
Next one comes from Gary in the chat. I can never remember how to properly hand chop my mortise. Can you demonstrate, especially which direction to hold the bevel of the chisel?
Chopping a mortise. I was just in scraper mode. By the way, so can I say this?
What?
About the tools we make?
Not yet.
Stay tuned. All right, what do we have here that we can chop a mortise in? This is a good question because this has to be done properly or else you're going to get in trouble. So here's a block of wood, piece of spruce.
You
Not
going in the
very
face
hard.
or the edge?
I'll go on the face. A little easier. So I'm going to draw that line right there. And then I'm going to, these are the ends of it. So it's only going to go to there and to there. Then I'm going to come in here.
Wait. Before you
What?
do that, have you thought about using a knife to do that instead of a pen?
This?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose you could so that they actually set in it, but no.
Try it.
I don't want to. I want to try it live. I might have to redo everything I said. So there I've got some marks that are going to help me. So we'll use a 3/8. I need a mallet. Now, there's no reason to clamp this because it's not going anywhere. So I want to stay away from these two outside lines. So I'm going to set this chisel so that the bevel is facing away. I'm going to set this chisel so that I'm right on this line. And here, the edge of my chisel is going to be right on that line. Oh, wait a minute. I've got to determine our depth. I need a Sharpie. Ken, have you got a Sharpie on you? No? Chris, have you got a Sharpie on you? Huh?
That's a Sharpie.
That'll work, thank you. So let's say we're going to go down this deep. So this is my mark, my depth gauge. Was that on the floor?
Yeah.
Put it
In
back and then I'll know where it is. So what I want to do is I want to get down to depth as quickly as possible. But you can't just drive the chisel down into a hole. You've got to have an area for the waste to go. So I'm on the line, and I'm holding it so that I can see plumb.
Ooh. Not very good at
Couldn't see it. No, I'm blind. And I'll pull that out, and I'll come over. I might, depending on the wood, I might be able to go a full line back, maybe half a line back. Now I've created a bit of a relief so I can get the next chop to go down a little bit deeper. Then I'll go to the next one. Not there yet. Go to the next one. Now what you'll notice is I've created a void. So as I tap on the chisel, the bevel rides this way, pushing these sharp edges, or clearing the path, so they're severing these fibers. Not ready to pop out some material yet. Next one. Down to depths. So now it's just a matter of going the same depths each time. Whoops. I got a twist in there. See if I can't get underneath it. And when you clear the shavings, you don't want to hold it like that.
Okay.
You're going to push like this so that the chisel will hopefully guide itself and keep it parallel to the sides. It just severs those fibers, and I like it when you pull off a little chunk like that. And it's so easy to do because of the way wood fiber cuts. You always chop your mortise parallel to the fiber, never perpendicular. So if I tried to chop this way, I'd split the wood, but I can go this way without an issue. Down to the mark, free up those fibers. I just think this is really neat. And the nice thing about this, you can chop this in the middle of a panel. Doesn't take very long. Now, if you're a little unsure of your skill, what you can always do is get a block of wood.
Well, you can do, if you have the proper mortise chisel.
Yeah. You can go in and you can clamp a block of wood right on that gauge line. And I would go in, I would check it like this. Clamp it, and then you can go in and simply hold your chisel against that side, and that'll keep it standing plumb. When you get to this last one, then I'll come in and put my chisel down in there, and I can still pry a little bit, and then I'll just keep coming. This is why you want your chisel to be sharp, because you're sitting on that end grain ramp. I can still pry because I'm not on the line yet. Still pry. I'm going to do this in 2 chops. Chisel's going to obviously want to push everything into the open void. Got to be careful here. Now this is the last one, so I'm going to set it right on the line. I'm setting it on this line, and I'm lining up with the gauge line. Once I get this started, I'm going to turn it this way so that I can see plumb in this direction. The chisel should guide itself in the hole, go down to the bottom. Now, just wiggle it enough to free it. If it's deep enough, I can put the chisel down in there. If I can get the crest down below the surface,
I don't think you can.
I can't. I could have pulled it like this and cleaned that bottom out, but I can't. Because if I pull on that, it's going to mess this up. So my only option in there, and this is where I like to go in with a narrower chisel, just so I don't have to jam it, and I'll just use my hand as a reference, and I can just go in there and dig out that debris. And this is a lot easier than trying to do that same thing with the chisel that's exact width. And then this one I would just turn around and do the same thing, cut back until I get right to my edges. And that's how you chop your mortise. You need good mortise chisels. And I'm not trying to sell you mortise chisels other than the fact that if you're going to do it, the right tools make the job so much easier. Lee Nielsen makes good mortise chisels, but they haven't had them available for sale in a while. Next, Frick.
Next one comes from Jimmy. How do you lay out
Where's
mortises?
Jimmy?
What?
Where's Jimmy?
In the chat.
In the chat.
How do you lay out mortises on 4 legs of a simple table so all mortises are aligned?
How do you lay out 4 legs on a simple table so they're all lined? Well, there wouldn't be 4. There'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So either way, I would have all my legs lined up, all the ends flush, and I would mark them all at the same time so that your marks are always all in the same spot. That one's easy. Hey, let us know if you want us to do the next live on scrapers, hand scrapers.
We have a new viewer from Denmark, Christian Rosgaard.
Hey, Christian from Denmark, welcome.
What's up with the Danish flag?
What's up with the Danish flag? Well, we had, hi Moosey. We had a combat wounded vet from Denmark here in our class in August?
Yeah.
August. And he gave us, his name is Casper, it's right on there. It was actually, yeah, it was the August class. So he gave us that flag, so we put it up there in memory of him. I don't remember what city Casper lives in, but I can find out in case you know him or want to meet him. Good craftsman. Very good craftsman. Doing a lot of work. Excellent dovetails. I plead guilty to always gauging an individual's craftsmanship by their dovetails, but seems to be my thing. But he had exceptionally good dovetails. Next, Vic. We
Next
run
one,
out of questions?
Yeah, we are actually.
Well, get some feedback. Do you want us to do a session
Yes, they do.
on scrapers? Okay. Well, between now and then, we're going to make it available for you to get some really good scrapers and some tools that'll make the preparation process so much easier. Oh my, you're going to like that. Hello, Bentley.
Everybody's asking for moose. Moose right there?
Moose. Oh, little Moose. Can Moosey make a cameo? Go get Moose. Oh yes. Oh, I forgot to mention Angie. Where's Angie? Ken, where's Angie?
You had her picture down for something.
Is it showing somebody?
Yes, it's her. Oh, it was with the T-shirts last time.
Uh-oh, I'm gonna get in trouble. Where's my picture of Angie? It's in a frame.
Picture on our little tag there.
Well, it should be right here. Well, Angie is Ken's cousin, and she and her sister Lynn do all of our PHP t-shirts, which you need to buy to keep her working. We have 3. We have one that says wood is good, navy blue. We have military green that says wood for good, and we have Angie's teal, which says wood doing good. So get yourself a t-shirt, help us raise awareness. And I'd introduce you to Angie if I could find the picture. I don't know what happened. Oh, yeah, I got to mention these. So something else I want to bring to your awareness. Kevin Lasky is the artist that does all of our artwork, did all of our mess hall and our JP workshop pictures out there. So I asked him last year to do a special MASH Christmas card for us, MASH PHP. So this is, if you remember, if you're a MASH fan, I am. In one of the early episodes, Hawkeye was dressed as Santa Claus for the MASH Christmas party, and they just started the party and they got a call from a soldier that was badly wounded in a foxhole under fire. So without having time to change, he grabbed his kit bag and headed out, and the helicopter lowered him down. And of course, the wounded soldier's looking up, seeing Santa Claus come down the line. So there's the MASH, there's our Purple Heart logo. And you can buy these on our website and use them for your Christmas cards this year. We pay a little royalty to Kevin for doing it. And that'll certainly make everybody aware of what's going on with Purple Heart Project. Hi, Moosey. Come see? Come see? No? This little Moose, this is Jake's youngest, oldest, only. And this is Bentley, so young and old. Bentley is Frick's oldest son, our oldest grandson. And this is little Bruce, who's affectionately known as Moose, or Little Moosey.
All I see are 2 people that need a haircut.
Yeah, Bentley and Bruce.
Yeah.
Hippies. See you, Moosey. Bye-bye.
Oh, do it. Give him a high five.
Oh, he does high five now? High five? Yeah.
Cute.
It doesn't stop. Bye. All right, next. How are we doing for donations? You haven't told me. How many, what are we giving away?
I can't see that.
Does we have 507 on? Is Gina on?
I don't know.
Did she go away? Gotta give a big shout out to Gina Crilly. Gina keeps everything on, so Ken keeps everything on the other side of this wall humming, and Gina keeps everything on the other wall humming. She takes care of all the orders. She's Johnny on the spot. Now, if you're a female, you can't be Johnny on the spot. What are you? Do they have that expression? Gina on the spot. She also takes, we have a company meeting every Tuesday morning, and she always provides the snacks for it, which is wonderful. But she really does a fantastic job in both customer service, and she and Pam taking care of all of our orders getting out. So as Christmas draws near and we get even busier, they really step up. And we can't forget Frick. What do we say about Frick?
I'm not sure yet.
What happened to your big green globe, Frick?
I didn't even turn on the frick cam today.
What?
He's just not in the
Bad
mood.
hair day? No makeup?
Nobody's been asking for it.
Yes.
And I didn't mention what Chris does, so can we talk about the plane?
Nope.
We can't talk about
Talk
the plane.
about what?
What you and Chris are working on.
What is that? I don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah, play dumb. So Chris is an engineer. What kind of an engineer, Chris? Mechanical engineer. He works in Fredericton, which is about 50 miles north. And I met Chris probably 3 years ago. 2019. And Chris has increased our productivity probably by a multiple of what, Ken? You'd be good at guessing that.
Wow.
3, 4?
At least 1.1.
Yeah,
Three times. And he's working on some new stuff that you will be thrilled. Can't tell you any more until we get a little bit closer, but there's a lot of stuff in the hand tool realm, stuff that for years just remained the same. Nobody thought anything. It's like, Jake, can we show a picture of the new adjuster?
The new what?
Adjuster?
I don't know what you're talking about.
So I'll give you one quick example. So this has been the same for 100 plus years. Actually 120, 130 years, maybe even 140 years. This was the adjuster that you turn to make your blade go out or pull your blade back in on your hand plane. And back in some of the early Stanley models, that adjuster was even, that adjustment wheel was even smaller diameter. Well, that's under the pressure of the lever cap, which holds everything tight, and it takes a lot of work to torque that thing. Used to drive me crazy because you have to stop to move it sometimes. Well, we got the idea, why not add some leverage to that? So we made what we call the adjuster, which gives you lots of leverage. I don't even think about it anymore. It's a game changer. It is literally a game changer, especially if you have tired old fingers, or I should say old tired fingers, or arthritic fingers, or even if you just want to make it easier. So we make one that fits Luban and Wood River from size 4.5 up. We make ones that fit Lee Nilsson's from size 4 up. We make ones that fit Stanley's from size number 4.
Technically 3.
Oh, and number 3 up. And we did a beta test on those, and only 1 out of 100 didn't work. So good chance it'll fit your Stanley's as well.
We're at 1,300.
1,300, so I'm only giving away one prize tonight? Oh, well. Well, we were the recipients of a lot of generosity this week, so. Next question, Frick.
Clive in Queensland, Australia. I've recently purchased some Wood River mortise chisels. Apart from flattening the backs and sharpening, what else needs to be done to tune them up?
Nothing, really. Nothing. That's it. Go to work. A mortise chisel is more of a brute force tool than a paring chisel, although, as Jake will frequently mention, you do want it to be nice and sharp, because when you're chopping down in that mortise, you want that to stay engaged with the end grain. You don't want it falling off into the opening, especially when it comes time to paring the outside edges of the mortise, and you're trying to get them squared up, and you're going down there, and you're literally just scraping down the end grain wall, and you really want it to bite, catch. These, by the way, I could never figure out why mortises, they were always so long. When you building a piece of furniture, would you ever need to have a mortise that would be even that deep? Mind you, that gives you some usable life. But they made these things, and they were so awkward to hold on to. These are just right. Wonderful, wonderful chisels. And this little scraper, oh, we'll talk about that later. Talk about that later? All right. Next, Frick.
All right, last one. Brian from Houston, Texas.
Hey, Brian.
I've heard different opinions on how many mortise chisel a person needs. While most people say 6 to 8 bench chisels, some say just 1 or 2 mortise chisels. What are your thoughts on how many and which sizes are best for various applications?
Well, if you follow the rule, a third, and a third, probably 85% of the wood you're going to work with is going to be 3/4 of an inch thick. So that means you need a 1/4 inch mortise. The second dimension that you're going to use, which would probably represent 14% of the wood you use, is going to be 1.5 inches thick. So that would be a 1/2 inch. So there's your 1/4 and your 1/2. Me, I like to have one size smaller on both, just as I showed you a minute ago when it comes to cleaning out the mortise. So that would include a 3/16 and a 7/16, or you could go 3/8, because a 3/8 would be another size that you might frequently use. So I would say at a bare minimum, 1/4 and 1/2. And then I would say one up from that would be a 1/4, 3/8 and 1/2. And if you want to make your life easier with a 1/4, go with 3/16, an 1/8, a 1/4, and a 1/2. And then if you just want to fill out the set, get the other two.
Did you say a 3/16 and 1/8?
Oh, did I say 1/8? I didn't mean to say that. I meant a
3/8.
1/4. 3/16, 1/4, 3/8 and 1/2. Those 4 for sure. And if you want to add 2 more, get your 7/16.
Well,
5/16.
like you said, when you're making a mortise and tenon, your mortise chisel determines.
Yes, it's the all important, because that dictates how big.
So the more you have, the
Greater
more
variety
options
you
you
have.
have for cutting
Yep.
your mortise.
Yeah, but definitely start with a 1/4. So in order to purchase 1/4, 1/2, 3/8, and
The
then
rest.
3/16, 5/16, 7/16. Any left, Frick?
Nope.
That's it.
Wrap it up.
Dennis?
So let's give away 3 dead cat sweaters, and we'll give away let's give away a Danny Bell. What do we call it?
Something caddy.
Table caddy.
Table caddy.
So, Danny Bell, table caddy, and 3 dead cats. Let's give away 3 dead cat sweaters first.
All right. Here we go.
These will keep you warm.
First dead
Big
cat.
thank you to Moose, who's usually here, but he didn't make it tonight.
Jonathan Walsh in Atascadero, California.
Hey, Jonathan, dead cat sweater on its way to you with the Purple Heart logo. Next one.
Next one's going to Skip Martin in Tracy, California.
Skip, California's getting warm tonight. You'll enjoy it. Next, make sure you send it. Make sure you contact us with the sizes so Gina can get them out for you.
Yeah, email's on the bottom of the screen. Alan Morgan in Limerick, Ireland. Ireland.
What's his first name?
Alan Morgan.
Alan in Ireland. Good time of year to have a dead cat sweater over there. You will love it.
I thought he was going to say Allen in Ontario.
No, Alan already got one.
Alan McEwen. All right, we ready?
Yeah. So this is for a Danny Bell hand dovetailed table caddy. And Danny does a lovely job on them.
It's going to Robin Powell in Gabriola, British Columbia.
Robin and Gabriola, BC. Congratulations. You'll love it. Danny Bell is a combat wounded Chinook helicopter pilot. Rotorhead. Flew for the 160th. Special operations, I think they called it. And Danny and his wife and 2 daughters and son live in the deep woods of Maine. What's the name of it, Jake? You were just there.
Jefferson,
Maine. Big shout out. Kevin Burst, is Kevin on tonight? Is he shoveling snow? Oh. So Kevin lives in upstate New York, and he's got at least 6 feet of snow. Keep it, Kev. Big shout out to you. Is Bob Abbott on tonight?
Bob was no.
Bob wasn't? Did we miss any other people to shout out to? Jake, did you see any vets that we missed?
Mm-mm.
Okay. All right, 2 weeks, we're going to do it on scrapers, on using them, obviously on preparing them, sharpening them, using them. And if you stay tuned to your newsletter, you'll find out where to get them between now and then. Have a good couple of weeks. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks for joining us.